Glad you can make it through the semester. Deb Carney is here visiting San Diego State on her sabbatical. She's at the Colorado School of Mines. She's in the Department of Mathematics. And Deb and I go way back. We started in graduate school at the University of Maryland together in 19. I'm not going to date us. A little while ago. So, yeah, so we had some late nights in the grad student office playing bridge and studying and everything. So anyway, yeah, Deb finished her PhD in logic, and she's now going to tell us about her sort of journey. And she's been a long time innovator now at Colorado School of Mines in improving their introductory math course sequence, calculus, linear algebra, differential equations. She's kind of been at the forefront of pioneering innovations for improving student success. So she's going to tell us a bit about that work as well. So with that, turn it over to Deb.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you to Crmse and SDSU for hosting me. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about my total scholarship of teaching and learning journey. And as far as outline, I'll give you a little bit of context just about me and the university and my teaching professor faculty position. And I'm going to talk about 3 different projects. I'm actually going to go in reverse chronological order and spend more detail, talk more about this coordination study, and then backtrack to something that came before that with calculus 2, and just a little bit about what I did with the linear algebra course, and happy to talk about any of those things. There we go. So context first. So a little bit about me. As Chris said, I'm a teaching professor in the Applied Math and Statistics department at Mines. I'm in my 11th year. I coordinate calculus sequence a lot, teach other things, and been engaging in total research since I've been there. And then outside of that, I have families. My husband is also a mathematician at the University of Denver, and 2 kids. And I like to boast I have 1.5 cats. I have a half cat because that's the neighbor cat, Trixie, who likes to visit. And then there's my cat, Tabby. So and they're sort of friends, a little more like frenemies maybe. And outside of that, I like to get outside, just hiking, walking, paddleboarding, and sort of inside pursuits. My husband's got me into bar trivia, and like to do reading, and as a family, like to play board games. And a little, maybe more towards the mind side, something else I'm passionate about. I'm co-advisor and biggest co-creator of the Society for Women in Mathematics at Mines, or an AWM student chapter. I looked on the website, it says there's a chapter here at SDSU. So if people are involved in that or online, I love to talk about those kinds of things. And that's a mentoring group for, undergraduate students through faculty. And we've been successful in that at Mines. And now I'll go to sort of my math path, my math journey. So my blue highlighted states of where I have been. I grew up in Danvers, Massachusetts. And if you've heard of the Salem witch trials, Danvers is actually Old Salem Village, and that's where the witch trials took place. And then I went to University of Vermont for my undergraduate. Went to University of Maryland, where I met Chris, 1991. I gave up the date. Oh, I'm going there. I did my PhD there, and then through a couple of postdoc positions, UT Austin, and then at UConn and Stores. And University of Denver took us to Colorado. My husband got a job there first. I was home with our daughter, and went into a lecturer position there, and then to where I am in my current position at the School of Mines as teaching faculty. And then right end, I thought I should add San Diego State, since I'm here now, feeling fortunate to be able to visit. So that's sort of my mathematical journey. And I might say, why I went to graduate school, University of Vermont. I had this really amazing mentor who unfortunately is not with us anymore, but just inspired me to want to teach. And that was really my interest. And I thought I wanted to do it at the college level. So that led me to, which I did, which led me to graduate school. And I would say, kind of UT and Austin, I was still sort of toiling around in that math logic world, maybe not quite admitting that wasn't where my heart was. And then when I went to DU, I was definitely in a teaching focused position. And I'd say when I've come to Mines, just really, I feel like my career's flourished around this teaching faculty position. And so that's been fun and good for me. I'm going to go one more place with Chris. I just have to.
Oh, no, you went there.
I went, or back then he was Raz. So, yeah, that was not our first year, but I don't know, maybe it was somewhere along that period. Still drinking coffee. Okay, so a little bit about the teaching faculty position at Mines. We have rank advancement, but no tenure. My responsibilities are 75% teaching, 25% service. I have an 18 credit per year teaching load. Calculus is 4 credits, so many times that means I would teach 5 courses if I had some calculus in there. Newly eligible for, we call it instructional design assignments. That's officially what I'm on, but nobody outside Mines knows what that is. And it's really sabbatical. There's university and department level support, travel support for professional development, which has been helpful. And otherwise, full voting member of the department. Our salaries are quite competitive, not quite tenure track level, but we're close. And maybe on the downside, it was sort of interesting recently, the Board of Trustees voted in favor of sabbaticals, but they didn't want to give us longer contracts. Like, okay, I'll take the sabbatical. And I do, even though I have a 2-year contract, I feel secure in that position. There's like a 1-year clause about if I was going to be fired, I have supposed to get a year beyond that. But I've been quite secure in my position. And it's this Mines at 150 is our 150th anniversary is coming up. And it's really been kind of, I think, around this focus of we want to be a leader in educating STEM students. And there's been some investment on the faculty side in terms of teaching faculty. And so a little bit about Mines, if you haven't heard of us, Public Research University, we are focused on engineering and other STEM disciplines. We're newly R1 and we're pretty proud of that. And maybe interesting fact is every student at Mines takes 4 math classes, Calc 1 all the way up through differential equations, and we don't start below that. So if you come to Mines, you're starting in Calc 1. And there's a lot on this slide, but I just may want to focus kind of on the faculty piece. And so I'm talking about that, just in terms of numbers, fall, these are some targets, and it's kind of interesting, fall 22 numbers are, we've got 216 tenured line faculty and 116 teaching faculty. Professor of practice is also a teaching line, but without rank advancement. And as advertised more, or as its description is for people coming from industry who maybe don't have an educational background per se, but are coming from the industry side. And you can sort of just see a little bit about, our numbers in terms of undergraduate students and graduate students. And we've been seeing some our growth hasn't slowed down at all. As far as the undergraduate population, just, a little bit here, we've got a, strong student body coming in. We've got about 32% women. We're pretty white. If you look at the picture, trying to work on some of those things, making, more progress on gender, increasing number of women at the university. And a little bit about just our department. We are about half and half. So we've got 12 teaching faculty, 11.4 tenure track faculty. We have some joint appointments are kind of starting to be a thing. The other interesting things in the fall, we had 16 adjunct faculty. Many of those are teaching full loads, and that's another issue. So we're trying to work on. And we also have we have a nice teaching postdoc program and graduate teaching fellows. So those are people teaching our courses, and then kind of at the undergraduate level, 100 something majors and about 30 PhD students. So that's what we look like. And okay, so that was it. So that was context. And now I'll spend more of my time on this coordination study. I'm going sort of backwards. This is what I've been working on most recently, and we'll spend less time as we go down the list, but then I'll sort of look at it and the other kind of we'll look back at the end. So the first piece, just about coordination at Mines. Mines itself has had a long history of coordination, both inside and outside the math department, physics and other disciplines. I mentioned, every student takes these 4 math classes. We also coordinate those classes, as well as an intro stats course and a scientific computing course. And coordination for us means common assessments, common exams, common topics. We sort of, stop at the level of truly dictating what happens in the classroom, but that structure around the class is determined. And there's been some evolution of innovation in the department. And I wasn't a part of it, but we had sort of NSF funded integrated calculus and physics program at one point. And then we did something with Mathematica, and then most recently, sort of an effort to infuse active learning into our calc sequence. And I said, right, we start at Calc 1. We have no pre-calculus offerings at Mines, which is also maybe another something I think we need to take a look at if we want to work on, I think, diversifying our student body. But that's kind of, there's a history of coordination in the department, which, maybe makes some things easier, maybe some things more challenging. One thing that was sort of happened that was nice for us, there was a university, program, that there was interest in getting sort of redesigning courses all across the university, and not maybe explicitly said, but maybe sort of in the background, with a hope of there'd be some active learning coming into all of our courses. So we were fortunate in the summer of 2016, 5 faculty and AMS participated in this program. It's me and my colleague Becky Swanson. We've done a lot. All these projects actually we've done together with others, so we've worked together a lot. We're working on Calc 2, Mike at the top on Calc 1, and then Holly also working on Calc 1, but a different flavor for students who didn't make pass the course the first time. And we had some rather significant revisions. They're just sort of described in the middle. We started with revising learning outcomes, and both Calc 1 and Calc 2 created a lot of materials. The project Calc 1 was their focus were these activities to be used once a week. And for Calc 2, we were working, it was really essentially a flipped classroom. And so we had daily activities with some video content to sort of support that missing class time. And Becky and I'm going to talk a little bit more at the end. We've talked about our results in terms of just success of implementing the model in this Primus article, if you're interested in that. But this sort of helped the change process a little bit. And in terms of just what calculus looks at Mines, we've got smallish sections, 35 to 45 students. We're meeting 4 days a week. It's a regular 16-week semester. Our instructional team, it mainly Vital faculty acronym being used by the MA. If you haven't heard that, visiting instructor. Now I can't forget it.
Instructor, TAs, adjunct lecturers.
Yeah, or T, I think temporary.
Okay.
Yeah. And lecturers are, meaning teaching faculty. So we are. This was from the fall when I was coordinating Calc 1, pretty typical of what an instructional team might look like for any of the Calc sections. And you can kind of see our enrollments at the bottom. Calc 1 is smaller. We have a good number of students coming in with AP credit. And they start a little bit ahead. And typically newer instructors try to keep them in Calc 1 or Calc 2, just for maybe the content is a little bit easier to start with. That's what calculus looks like. And again, maybe just to dig a little bit deeper, I mentioned we coordinate. So common syllabus, common calendar, common pacing. We've got common midterms, right? So you have to keep that pacing up. We also grade exams together with a common rubric. And then there's homework, both written and online. And we haven't really been getting into quizzes too much. The active learning piece activities either have been counted as a participation grade, or some instructors not counting those at all. And I should say, I guess, we've been doing pretty well, that our DFW rate's somewhere in the 10 to 20%, which is good compared to national averages. And we sort of also have had a history of regularly using assessment data to inform some of those changes. And when we sort of made these changes, I think was important is that no one is really forced to, that we really give faculty the option of whether or not they want to use these materials. We would make sort of the default to use them, so maybe it was a little harder to opt out, but it isn't completely an option. And as far as just coordination, what that role looks like for us, it's an expected service role amongst the teaching faculty. So there's not course release currently. There's not extra pay for that. We are currently in a cycle of rotating off. I think we're every 2 years, but sometimes it's been 3 years. We've got assistant department head just sort of tracking, making sure we're all doing it. And we do have a responsibilities document that outlines sort of a minimum set of duties, things like, you got to set the calendar, write the exams, with input, do this end of term assessment report. And so that's what it's been looking like for us. Okay, and so I guess that's the kind of description just of calculus and coordination and what it looks like. And I want to lead up to this coordination study that I'm doing with Becky Swanson and Megan Sanders of the Treffney Center, our Teaching and Learning Center. We had been fortunate to be involved in a couple projects or be sort of, have some site visits from the MEA, the National Calculus Study that Chris was involved in, and also the Seminole Network that gave us back some information. So we, we had the MEA site visit in 2017, and they identified, these are sort of 4 broad things that they identified as some of our strengths that we were coordinating. So within, that's in big letters, we have sort of good coordination within a course, but maybe we're struggling across connecting the courses. We're using evidence-based instruction. We were supporting our teaching faculty and instructors, teaching faculty valued on campus. We had internal sort of supports as well. I'm involved, and we have a professional learning community that meets twice a month that invites everyone to talk about teaching and learning ideas, so not just sort of permanent faculty. And they identified that we were supporting our students in terms of, we have a on-campus Amos Learning Center for tutoring, as well as a university-wide one as well. So we had some positives identified there. And then also some areas for growth. So by comparison, suggesting we look at coordinating across our courses, because we had some nice projects going on, but they maybe weren't connected. They weren't connected necessarily, other than this broad active learning umbrella. And maybe we could look at making that experience more standard for students. They still sort of pushed us a little bit more while we had student supports. Maybe they could be used better. So advertising those a little bit more, promoting those more. And something around equity and diversity. While we were doing, the university, I guess, has been making, pursuing ideas around equity and diversity. We weren't really doing that specifically in our courses or in the math department. And so they're pointing us towards that. Maybe that's something that we could look at. And then when we look at what Seminole told us, some things, sort of overlapping or the same. So it's a sort of network for active learning. We came on as a phase 3 partner. There was a phase 2 partner that we applied to. We put a proposal in to get some money to sort of work on our improvements. We were not selected for that, but we were we were invited to join in phase 3, and that involved being involved in a network. And sort of sharing and learning from others. That also involved a site visit from Seminole, and they identified the following change levers, so things we could kind of look at as we're trying to pursue some of these changes. So coordination was one. Looking at professional development, and we've been doing some professional development in the department, but maybe looking at professional development for coordinators, for example. So maybe we could expand some of those things. And also looking at using the departmental data. So we had a good history before COVID, I should say, of collecting departmental data and sort of writing assessment reports that could be handed down to the next person whenever there was a change. So maybe looking at to support some of these changes. So we had some positives, and then again, they gave us some recommendations. So a little bit, while we had worked on outcomes before, and I think this sort of goes to the cross coordination piece. We maybe didn't have total agreement across all the instructors. We actually, I just noticed there's something in the chat. I don't know if I should poke on that, or do you see that, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I was
Ignore it.
just putting in a note about vital faculty. I put a link in for that. So,
It sounds like Mary.
that's great.
yes,
Okay.
it's Mary, sorry.
That's okay.
Hi, Mary.
Thank you.
Hello.
Okay, so so Seminole is also recommending perhaps having a coordinator task force to sort of take on some of these, looking at our calculus sequence as a whole. They noticed there was maybe some question about the role of mentoring in a coordinator responsibilities, and I'll come back to that. And some other things, make clearinghouse, perhaps that's an easy way to share materials, and maybe exploiting what we're doing in the PLC, and also perhaps looking at, can we fund adjunct faculty to attend, as a little extra help. I mean, it's not as full-time position would be the ideal, but maybe this is a step towards, small step, I should say, towards that. So those were some recommendations from Seminole, and sort of putting that all together, like kind of thoughts from Becky and I were, we're doing well, but there definitely seems to be this theme or, suggestion of maybe we should be looking at coordination across the courses. Also in terms of, active learning, we're doing it, but I don't think we're really doing anything or looking at equitable practices, and that's, maybe around professional development. And then third, I added this question marks, I forgot. So just the barriers kind of to change, most recently have been, COVID was pretty insane, and just faculty time and energy coming out of that. And maybe I was trying to think of a word. The third, I sort of feel like respecting faculty autonomy sort of in this structure. Nobody wants to be sort of told what to do, and I don't want to be told what to do. So how sort of thinking about that, if how do we sort of get this then sort of buy-in and keep this sustained active learning approach going on. Okay, so that was a description of those site visits, and that leads us to, I'll talk a little bit about coordination study that Becky and Megan and I are doing. So Becky has mentioned she and I started at the same time at Mines. It's kind of been nice to have a partner in crime, and Megan is the assessment director. Our Trefny Center is our Center for Teaching and Learning, and she's been involved with a couple projects with us. And we just thought, well, let's step back and just try to understand what's going on in our department in terms of coordination, and maybe we can identify additional practices that would be useful.
Rebecca just.
Oh, hi, Becky. Okay, thank you. Okay, so here's what we did. We decided I would start with a survey. We surveyed separately coordinators, so those were all teaching faculty, and then coordinated, so people who had taught but in a coordinated who were teaching in that coordinated course. And we asked them to describe the frequency with which 15 different practices either happened, so they were experiencing, and then on the other hand, how important do they find those practices? And we'll say what they are in a minute. And then we had 2 open-ended questions to allow for feedback. And we surveyed 12 coordinators, all our current teaching faculty at Mines. There's also think speaks to we have a very nice position. We haven't had any turnover on the teaching faculty since I've been there. We almost all replied. And on the other end, we surveyed 47 coordinated faculty. So those could be anyone, tenured teaching faculty, a lot of adjunct faculty, and postdocs, and also graduate teaching fellows. And we had a reasonable response rate. And we looked back 4 years. We decided to just cut it off because people's memories maybe fail a little bit. And just to point out, so this wasn't just calculus, this covered any course where there was coordination going on. We just decided not to separate out by course. And so the survey just looked like this. We just had 3 buckets. And for each one of these statements, they were just asked, so this is how often they happen. So most of the time, half of the time, a few or none of the times. And so it's kind of nice drag and drop. And then the same thing on how important were those actions. Very somewhat not as important. And in terms of the so statements, we had 15 statements, and there's a lot on that page. And I'll say a little bit, you've heard about these two orientations for coordination, which Chris and others have been involved in, and I'll come back to that in the next slide. But just to give you an idea to sort of highlight in red in this, humanistic growth side, things about professional development, making me feel welcome, attending to student experience, sort of things like that. We had those 7 statements, and they're really about personal and professional growth of instructors teaching the course. And then, oops, there we go. On the other side, sort of research managerial type things. We asked about these sort of activities were going on. Did we demonstrate pedagogical knowledge? Giving information about content. Providing homework, providing materials, strong administrative skills. We use Canvas for our learning management system. So things sort of on that side, kind of the just sort of logistical management of the course, as well as knowledge, experience in teaching the class. So we had those 15 practices. And so you might ask, so first, I guess, why those 15? So we just stepped back a little bit. We looked at those insights and recommendations. Publication from the MAA chapter 9 talks about coordination. We looked through that and sort of picked out what they were sort of identifying as good coordinator aspects or properties, or what they may do. And then this article by Alex Martinez or Antonio, sorry. Okay, who was graduate student here. Okay, and others. There's an article about course coordination and these orientations. So we looked through that article and also picked out some of these actions that sort of fell under these, sort of good coordination properties, as well as we have our own coordination document. And so sort of looking through there, was there anything extra? So we came up with our list of 15. And then they sort of nicely almost split in half into these 2 course coordinator orientations. So humanistic growth side, one that's sort of focusing on professional growth of the instructors in the course. And then this resource managerial side, kind of building on the strengths of a coordinator, sort of knowledge, experience, just logistical type things. And we're not the coordinators having, not that the proposal is, oh, you should be one or the other, but we all maybe have a mix of both of these things together. So the question is, okay, then what happened from the data? And so I should say this is new. So we just got the data back in January. So I haven't fully looked at it, but I just want to, as I finish sort of with this part, just sort of highlight a couple things that have come out as interesting. So this is just the experience data. So like what was happening. One good thing is that we seem to mostly be doing these things that support good coordination, but there was sort of one notable exception, and that was around professional development. And so you notice we're sort of more down here. This was happening, right? This is experience. And so happening, you know, if you got 40%, 30%, we're on the sort of few or none or about half the time. And that sort of fits with, I guess, the messaging we were getting out of Seminole, I guess, about that we, you know, there seemed to be a question about the mentoring role. And we did sort of see that we had these open-ended questions, right? There were comments, this was from a coordinator, there are comments coming, you know, along that side too, just not clear. I'll rather than read it, I can just let you take a second to read it and I can take a drink of water. All right, and so I guess, you know, it's in here. It'd be nice to have some clarity about what my role is. So we've got, you know, something to discuss there. So far that's sort of what was jumping out us on the experience side. And then the importance side, there are a few things there. And we were able to separate out this data. So this is, we're looking at coordinated faculty. But splitting up, we asked people whether they were permanent or non-permanent. And I know non-permanent is not a fantastic label, say you're non-something, but permanent meaning, you know, we have full-time year-long contracts that includes teaching faculty, right, and tenured faculty. And then on the non-permanent side are adjuncts, our postdocs, and our GTFs. So we are now separating out the data this way. And there may be, you know, some things that are surprising and maybe one thing that's kind of surprising. So importance of being welcoming. So we got non-permanent on top, adjuncts, graduate students, postdocs, and our tenure teaching faculty down below, right? You've got, this is real, seems to be really important for those adjunct faculty. And then when you look at sort of tenure teaching faculty, right, where it's you know, we've got some saying not as important, so skewed towards the other end. And perhaps this is not surprising, but something a coordinator should be aware of. You're working with a team of mostly people in this top category. The other, and here was just right, just a comment from that side of the survey. Just, you know, it was important to this person, and they were made to feel welcome. And then another piece of data is around importance of exam grading. And again, we sort of see this like for non-permanent faculty, hey, this is really important to us. Then you get down to tenured and teaching faculty, you know, we're down here. Right. And maybe that's more, or again, maybe not as surprising, you know, that in a way I feel like it's not surprising, right? In fact, faculty like to do their own thing. But on the other hand, I feel like it is surprising, like you think we would sort of appreciate the structure of coordination and why we might be doing that. And then, you know, there's sort of, you know, this sort of discussion or quote around, you know, sort of grading together and some of the issues, you know, I guess this is more towards, you know, pointing towards wanting to have that common rubric and why that might be important. Okay, so maybe those aren't as surprising. The next one's kind of fun. We asked about importance of pedagogical knowledge. And again, right, we've got non-current, so adjuncts and postdocs, grad students up here, and tenured teaching faculty down here. Right up here, we think it's, you know, either very important or somewhat important, but we go down here. I mean, we got nobody over here thinking it's very important. And we're like, you know, we're down here. So, which is, you know, interesting. And I think something, you know, something for us to dig into, because also, right, there are some teaching faculty down here who have been, you know, maybe not many, well, actually, I don't know. So it's, you know, but it's our faculty, and why we not think that's important. So something for us to look into there.
Oh, so that bottom row included some teaching faculty who were teaching in a coordinated course, but they weren't the coordinator at the time.
Could it be that the people thought the permanent faculty thought they knew the pedagogy and they didn't do the coordinator?
It could be. But I don't. I mean, I think, right, it's curious, and maybe something we could, you know, I mean, this is just right, what are they reading out of that statement about something we could look into a little bit more. And then, yeah, I think so. Just finally, last piece of data on this. This is about, is a faculty member's feedback input valued in the course? And again, I mean, for both categories, we're on this side, but sort of adjunct faculty, graduate students, postdocs thinking it's, more think it's very important versus down here, the high, 63% and the somewhat important. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's that as a permanent faculty member, I think I get a say, or I do get a say in things, and that's maybe not important in this course, and I want to let go of the reins a little bit. And for others who don't have that permanent status, this is this is important to them. So that's just a little peek at that sort of coordination data. And before, so this will be kind of the end of the first chunk, but it's sort of been thinking about just reflecting back and sort of looking at what's next. First, definitely the mentoring expectation as a coordinator seems to be coming out for us to look at that. This maybe wasn't so we didn't pull this out as much in this survey, but we definitely have opportunity for looking at equitable practices and active learning. And I think being mindful of how we can use coordination, or that coordination role as a lever for change. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next piece. And we just need to look in the data a little bit. Okay, that's the first part. Maybe I'll just pause. I don't know if there are any questions about, about that before I just switch a little bit. I'm going to dig more deeply into the Calc 2 project, not as deep as this, and then a little bit on linear algebra if you're curious about those things, but I can stop now if there's a question. Yeah.
I mean, I do have a little bit of a question about the adjunct faculty that you spoke to or had surveys from, but the majority of the adjunct faculty just kind of teaching 10 hours here, 10 hours there, or are they there?
They're kind of there. So it's an interesting place. I think we have adjunct faculty. I can think of one adjunct faculty. I've been there 11 years. I think he's been there 9 years. Teaching full loads and typically not teaching somewhere else. Yeah. And we just haven't had support for bringing on more full-time positions. And I think, there are some questions around that, balance between tenure and teaching faculty, but
sorry, I just wondered if the differences were because they were teaching 10 hours at one school, so that the importance is, I really need to know what's going on here because I have 4 other schools to,
yeah, it's more typical. They're just teaching for us. Our pay is like really good. Teach a calculus class, like $8,800 for one section. So if you're doing 4 of them, you maybe don't always guarantee that, but you don't get benefits, they're like, but.
How many part-time adjunct faculty do you have?
So in the past, it's been typically none, but you saw that number 16 I had. It's this year, for whatever reason, we have had more, a few more one-offs. I don't know the numbers exactly. Yeah.
Really different than many universities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our army of part-time people, like you said, right? There's like
just
Yeah.
running
Running
from
from
one
one-
campus.
Right.
to another.
Yeah, that is not.
Even different like semesters, quarters, coordinated, non-coordinated, it's like a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe I'll move on to just talk a little bit about the Calc 2 course. And I can start by saying, so this was, so myself and Becky, but then also and Megan out of the Teaching and Learning Center, and Sam and Ariana at the time were also involved in the Teaching and Learning Center. And we've published results on the redesign and really the supporting faculty piece through the change. And so first, kind of why sort of we why did we decide to do it? First Becky and I had worked on a linear algebra course together. I had already mentioned we had this university-wide sort of structure, this redesign institute that came with a month summer salary that helped. And our, just previously the project with linear algebra, that was, well, it was used by others. That wasn't a big coordinated course, so maybe we're sort of interested in sort of expanding and making materials that could easily be used by others. And also just doing better. We sort of look at our calculus course, a lot of lower level, calculate this, calculate that. Maybe could we push a little bit in terms of outcomes. And for Cal 2, it was a flipped model. Becky and I made all the materials, videos, pre-class questions, activities, daily lesson plans. So instructor supports. And just kind of structure was watch a short video before class, answer a few pre-class questions, come in for a little bit of lecture at the start, remaining big group chunk of time on a student activity, and then wrap up at the end. So really a flipped model. And otherwise, I should say, when we designed it, we wanted it to be able to run side by side with a lecture-based course. I mean, we didn't because we weren't going to force this on anyone, and we were trying it ourselves to start. And so that was important. And then in terms of just implementing it, right, so it was kind of like maybe sort of nudging our colleagues, but not hammer over the head. But we started piloting, just Becky and I, in an honors calc class, and then next semester, offered it, and a few people joined us. And then by the time we got to spring, all up to spring of 22, we've had everyone using it, with the exception of one instructor who was an adjunct faculty and was about to retire. So he was like, yeah, I'm not, he didn't need any, his life was full. So that was fine. And then either Becky or I have coordinated through the whole period, all of 20, with one semester exception, up to spring of 2022. And we've had, let's see, yeah, so I guess that's what I'll say about that. And generally, if it meant to implement, if people were using it, they were using the things. They were using our pre-class videos, they were using their pre-class questions, and they were using the activities. And then they're lecturing, or even how they use the activities would be up to them. In the paper, we went, we sort of looked at, supports, tried to identify supports for why this maybe was successful. There definitely were institutional supports around teaching faculty and the culture. We had this history of using evidence-based practices already, and we did have some communities built. Our departmental PLC coordinators were doing weekly meetings. So we've sort of identified some things around support. And in terms of success, which we also reported on, student success really meant sort of DFW rate, so D, grade of D, failing withdrawing. And we started around here, and you kind of notice, and it still wasn't horrible, but a little higher. We get into, this only goes up to 2019, but really changed, a little fluctuation, but not too much. We're having improved DFW rates. We also have some data related to particular student outcomes, and we saw some improvements there. And on the faculty side, so we define success in terms of this implementation rate. So if we look up to, we didn't have the numbers past that, but up to spring 2020, we had 14 unique instructors using the materials, and many of the 76 sections up to that point. And really up to spring 2022, only 3 instructors chose not to do it. Somebody just wasn't sure the first time and then did it the next time. We had one teaching faculty member who is just didn't do it, and then hasn't been back in the rotation, and the person who was retiring. And so I think, we're using this as a, indication of success and strength of the model. And I think it was important, everybody was opting in, nobody was forced to use it. And then we also wanted to look at faculty success in terms of experience. And so we did some interviews that we did with help of the Trefny Center. We did it with 8 instructors. And then we had these themes come out amongst those interviews, the sense of community. Consistency was in terms of consistent for the student, on the student side. People were appreciating that students were seeing that. It was easy to implement, we just, hey, put it on Canvas. If you want to use it, just, copy, paste, or we would control the Canvas course and make it easy for people to use. It was doing what we thought it would do, facilitating active learning, and people were noticing it was, they were better connecting with their students. And was there, oops, sorry, go back. Yeah, so I just, where the arrows are, I picked out just, kind of a couple other quotes coming from these instructors, that there was a strong sense of community, they're able to ask Becky and I questions, that was coming out through the interviews. This easy to implement, right? It was easy to implement it. It was set up on Canvas. We had a cloud-based folder using Dropbox or whatever it was at the time. And then this sort of better connection to students, mentioned by 7 out of the 8 instructors. This was, typically people weren't teaching in this way before we had started this project. Of the instructors teaching Calc 2 with us, I should say. And so that was the project. And, if we sort of looking back, we definitely, getting this feeling respect our instructor autonomy, allowing them some choice was important. This creation of a community also seemed to be important. This didn't address, and we're recognizing sort of coordinating across calculus, across, not just within, is a challenge. And we have this question of what happens when someone else coordinates. Well, it happened, right, fall of 22, and what has happened in that semester, the coordinator made the materials available. And I think 3 instructors used them. They were all instructors who had taught with Becky or I before, use the materials. The coordinator chose not to use them, and which is, fine. And then in the spring, we have, I think, one, as far as I know, a postdoc is using them. He's been working with Becky Swanson, and so he knew about them. He's sort of using some of the materials on his own. So there's, there's something there to kind of look at, and it goes to, I think it's a lot to instructor or the coordinator autonomy. Maybe that's it. Okay, so that was the Calc 2 project. And I have just a couple slides on linear algebra. I'll squeeze it in 3 minutes. And so if you're interested in talking to me about this, I would be happy to. Sort of going backwards in time, right? 2014, 2015, sort of newly at Mines, myself and Becky, and Nick is my husband is a mathematician at DU. This was really our first project. And, we were just, why we wanted to try something new, improve learning, we got these nice positions, and we decided on a partial flip in this case. So it was like a little sort of baby step towards something new. And we did a pilot amongst all our classes. We used the Lay linear algebra book. It kind of looks like a standard course in terms of grading. Similar to the math model we use later. What's just a little bit different is the activity came first in class, and then the lecturing came afterward. But again, all the materials were created by Becky, Nick, and I. That meant videos, that meant activities, that meant everything pre-class questions. And when we started out, we weren't really thinking, oh, let's publish this. But when we were finished, we were like, that seemed to be successful. And that maybe sort of nudged us towards, well, maybe let's think about sharing. So we had some improved exam data in terms of learning objectives, improved DFW rates. And we did a survey with our students. And maybe I'll just highlight a couple things. There was sort of general, this is like our first foray into active learning. Like, we're just curious at this point, hey, does it work? And students generally saying, hey, watching the videos were helpful. And then, the other piece, the format of this class is enjoyable, also kind of more students there. So we were at this point just curious, how was it working? And determined there was a little bit of success in there. And so if I just kind of look back, linear algebra, not a coordinated course. But multiple instructors continue to use our materials both inside and outside of mine. So that's kind of fun. I just met someone I knew from before JMM, mentioned the materials, she's using them. You know, she sent me an email, hey, these are great. So they're being used even though it's not in a coordinated setting. You know, we took those, I think, lessons learned in creating materials to help later with the Calc 2 project. There are definitely things about flipped learning or active learning, you know, it takes time. Communicating with students is important about what and why you're doing. And, you know, sort of I look back, you know, this was the beginning of my SOTL journey at Mines. And I really feel it was, you know, supported by the structure of the, of the teaching faculty and the support for teaching at Mines. So that's kind of fun to look back and see how it's grown. And I'm gonna stop. I thank you for listening. And there's some references at the end if anyone's curious or you want to share.
Awesome. Maybe we take some questions from online first. Oftentimes if you're watching online, you don't get to participate as much. So we can take some questions from anybody in the chat. Nothing yet?
No, no one can chat, but
Okay.
Okay.
you could open your mics and speak.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Chris. Thanks, Deb, for coming here and talking to us. I thought it was great. I think like you talked about this theme of kind of like having to respect teacher autonomy. Like it's there's always like this careful balance that must be played, right? I think it was definitely highlighted in the difference between like the permanent and non-permanent faculty and how important they perceived like these different coordinators roles. I thought that was really interesting. What are your thoughts on like selling this coordination as something that's not like only making the lives of the teachers easier, like hopefully, but also making like the student experience more universal and, you know, therefore easier to attend like equitable teaching practices and things like that? Because it sounds like you had incredible like success of instructors opting in when you were coordinating it, right? But then is it my understanding that once you're not coordinating it, not as many people are adopting the materials?
Right. I mean, yeah, that's a good question. And I think it really has to be, I don't want to force anybody to do something, nor, you know, I think I'm going to be successful that way, but I think just keep trying and doing what I'm doing and maybe presenting, you know, data, you know, hey, here's how this works, just so it starts to be more the norm, you know, because, you know, as much as, you know, maybe I love coordinating, right? I want a break every once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. I mean, you were coordinating between you and Becky, you said where it was like 6 years between you that you were coordinating that course.
Yeah, with one break, I think. And that person used the materials he had been sort of already doing with Becky and I, and that was that was his choice. And so I think it is this question about what I think coordinators should have some choice. So I think I don't have an answer, and it's a question I would like to think about.
Sure,
how do
absolutely.
we sustain these things? Yeah.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you say a little bit about your choice to switch from the linear algebra where you started the class out with active learning and then you had some like mini lecture, but then you flipped that for the Calc 2 program?
Yeah. I think part of our motivation with linear algebra is it's so sort of definition and just vocabulary heavy that our thought was if we do some of that in a video and then they come out first and get to practice in front of us in class, we can sort of help maybe a little bit in understanding those definitions before we start sort of piling on the rest of linear algebra. Like it's hard to sit in a 50-minute, right? Like, let's start with the definition of, linear independence at 12 and by 12, by 12:15, I got it. And I can be like working with these things. So I think that was a little bit of our motivation to do it that way versus, and Calc 2, it didn't feel as much like that. The top, because still, you know, I didn't talk too, talk too much. We're trying to reach higher learning outcomes, you know, not making it so computational. I think we did that to a little degree, but ultimately I feel like our calculus courses are fairly computational. And so maybe we felt more comfortable you know, doing that on a video and then just having to talk a little bit and let them play around with, you know, those ideas in class more. Yeah. I think, yeah. Yes.
I'm curious to know what kinds of institutional support and rewards you got for your parent successes here.
So after the fact,
Anyhow.
I mean, you know, there have been, I mean, not anything specific, although I think maybe there has been some recognition that the department as a whole is doing well at teaching. There's been another push for online courses at Mines, and there was some money given to faculty, you know, to help develop those. So it maybe, you know, maybe that was partially because we had successes in other areas. You know, the linear algebra course was completely on our own time, like make our own videos. There was that's the Teaching and Learning Center, what was like just starting at that time. By the time we got to calculus, there was more help maybe with making videos on campus. I mean, that's sort of support in developing it. You know, I've won a teaching award. I mean, maybe there are some things that have come after the fact, but nothing, I'd say more tangible. Or, you know, and I think it's something for us to, you know, to look at, I think in terms of the coordinator role, right? If we take some of this data, maybe you can push for, hey, maybe we should have a teaching release, right? Or, you know, something rather than just rotating it around. I think there's an opportunity there. Yeah.
How successful was moving some of these courses, maybe especially Calc to online?
Yeah, so we now have all those, 1, 2, 3 and DiffyQ are all online formats. 2 colleagues did a study last summer. And I mean, basically, you know, looking at exam scores, online students are doing worse comparatively to students which you almost, but there's been a big push for online courses from the university. It kind of started at the graduate level, like certificates, let's bring in some more tuition dollars. And now it's sort of pushed a little bit to undergrad in the summer, you know, let's, you know, in engineering school, a lot of focus on internships and things like that. So this allows students to take our courses while doing those other things. Yeah, I'm a little on the fence. I've developed Calc 3. I helped with that. I'm going to teach it for the first time this summer, and I'll find out for myself. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking about kind of in terms of the structure and coordinating, which seems really nice. I was an adjunct faculty for a while. So like having that structure would have been fantastic to see this is, you know, what we're doing. Instead of just saying, go for it. But then at the same time, I'm thinking in terms of any change that needs to be done, right? So if you have kind of like this very structured set system, how much liberty there is, right, for an instructor or to pivot kind of the approach.
Right. And I think because we had the same exams and homework and, you know, the active learning part was just a little bit of a participation grade that, you know, if I had somebody say, I really don't want to do that, they could go side by side with me and do their lecture and it fits into the grading scheme. So, and I didn't think I mentioned, you know, once COVID hit, in fact, Becky was the lucky one who was coordinating at the time. And, you know, she was really able to make, the course didn't suffer. I mean, she was able to sort of keep that structure. DFW rates, I think, dipped a little, but not drastically. I think, you know, yes, speaks to the robustness of the model. But we really tried to be mindful of letting people opt into it. And You're welcome.
Just thank you from the
Oh,
chair.
okay.
The other question about like the handoff of coordinators' responsibility.
Yeah,
So just as like we provide some pedagogical autonomy for those within the teaching section, you know, your point was like coordinators, when they step into a new class, they should have some autonomy to do what they want.
yeah.
So at the same time, there's this tension, like, you and Becky and others spend a lot of time putting together a lot of good resource and material, so
Mhm,
it feels like it's a lost opportunity
mhm.
that like you made the coordinator's job easier almost, right? And so it's such a tension, like, I understand, like, you want to give the new coordinator some freedom and flexibility, but when does it become like, this is the way we do things here? That's the new normal. And then how do you get to that? Will it require kind of department discussion and votes, like, yeah, if you're gonna coordinate Calc 2, this is how we're gonna do it. Like that is like a said thing.
Yeah,
know.
I don't,
Thoughts on
I don't
that?
think it's gonna get, I think that is trouble.
You think that's trouble?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm gonna say like guilty as charged, like I coordinated Calc 1 this year. And did I use the materials that were sitting out there? Like started doing things more on my own, like things that, maybe that I was used to. And so maybe it's the sharing piece, and kind of making it out there. I think it's sharing the data, but I don't think, I am never gonna be able to make. And I don't think it's right, I guess. Like, I don't really want to tell a coordinator, you have to teach this course in that way. Like, I feel like there should be some flexibility, but maybe, sorry, I forget your name. Marlies was, made me think of, we do have, because Calc 1 looked different from Calc 2, different from Calc 3, I think adjunct faculty were sometimes struggling a little bit, like they're in Calc 2 with Becky and I, and we got this whole system, and then, you go to Calc 1 or whatever, Calc 3, and it's like totally different, like, wait, what a minute, what's going on? I think, there are issues with that. I think there's something to look at. There's definitely something to look into here. Yeah. But I don't want to be told what, right? I don't want to be told.
And where's that nudge? I think big word.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that word, nudge.
Right. Well, yeah. Mhm. So,
Well, thanks Deb again.
thank you.
Good night.
Okay.